All right, welcome to what is maybe the finale. I have no idea of Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. So we got all the stamps and did all of the mini games. We got actually 3 medals in all of them, so that's pretty awesome. And we also did areas J and K and finished up area H or I mean, because that doesn't have a text. Because I didn't have a tech demo. But anyway, we're gonna finish up area L in this episode. At least try, because there's a lot of insights. We might get through all of them. I don't know. We might finish the game now. We might not. Let's see. So we're going to start with the first one here. Do you know how many parts there are in Nintendo Switch 2 console? Do you know anything about its circuit board? Great answer. Just give me a moment. There it is. Nintendo Switch 2 console insights. Number 1. Let's do it. Many circuit board parts. On the Nintendo Switch 2 console's circuit board, there are twice as many parts as there were on the Nintendo Switch console's circuit board. The most common type of part used is the capacitor. These are used to help maintain stable electrical signals. Since the Nintendo Switch 2 console exchanges electrical signals at much higher speeds than the Nintendo Switch console, the slightest instability can cause it to stop working properly. So what we did was use even more capacitors to ensure that electrical signals were disrupted as little as possible. By enabling the exchange of stable, high-speed electrical signals in this way, Nintendo Switch 2 can run at high speeds. A single circuit board. This is the circuit board inside the Nintendo Switch 2 console. It might seem like it's a single layer at first, but the single sheet is actually made up of more than 10 thin layers. Each of these thin layers contain wiring that connects one component to another. The wires are a bit like the human nervous system. There are thousands of these wires on the console's circuit board. Each layer uses a slightly different wiring layout. We designed it as if we were trying to solve a puzzle with our hands. Wiring challenges. As you may already know, the circuit board for the Nintendo Switch 2 console has over 10 overlapping layers and thousands of wires. But the wiring isn't just about connecting all the components together. Other things need to be considered too. For instance, it's not possible to have wires crossing on a single layer. The wires had to be narrower than 0.1 millimeters to avoid overlap. The length of the wiring is important too. When an electronic signal runs through a wire, it's about as fast as the speed of light. Now consider the fact that this exchange takes place in a fraction of a billionth of a second. When you have several wires sending data together, they all need to be the same length, or else the signals will arrive at different times. So we had to make sure the lengths of each wire match, ensuring that the signals arrive at the same time. And one more thing. We made sure that the wires are not too long, as the signals could become too weak to reach their destination, and not too close to each other, as the signals could get mixed up. Games use electricity. Games use a lot of electricity. The Nintendo Switch 2 console is typically used to play games, so it's also likely to need a lot of electricity. Smart devices let you do much more than play games, but they consume less electricity. The amount of electricity that a smart device needs to run for a day would be used in Nintendo Switch 2 in about 3 hours. Incidentally, more than half of this electricity is used by the main computer, which is called the SoC. Alright. Quiz number 1. Which of the following consoles has more components on a circuit board? Switch 1, Switch 2, the same. 2. How many thin layers make up the Switch 2 console circuit board? 1, 3, 5, over 10. How fast are the signals that travel through the wiring on the Nintendo Switch 2 console circuit board? The speed of a top human athlete, the speed of a bullet train, the speed of a jet, the speed of light. What part of the Nintendo Switch 2 console requires over half of its total power usage? The screen, the microphone, the speakers, the main computer. This one. Should be good here. And we are. Let's go. So we learned about the console. Let's go. One of many. Alright. And sequel time. And more about the console here. You'll find about the chassis being composed of magnesium, alloy, plastic, and more. Alright. Yeah, I knew this was going to get a lot of techie here. Electromagnetic noise. Whenever there's an electric current running through the circuit board's wiring inside the Nintendo Switch 2 console, there will always be electromagnetic noise present. And electromagnetic noise can sometimes interfere with nearby devices, which can cause them to not work properly. Electromagnetic noise doesn't easily penetrate metal, so to prevent a lot of it from escaping the console, we wrap the areas where it's emitted in metal. For instance, take the main computer called the SoC. We encase the SoC in metal to prevent a lot of electromagnetic noise from getting out. Static electricity. When the weather is dry and the temperature is low, you may feel a little shock when touching something metal. This is static electricity. If static electricity hits a game console, the console could stop working or become broken. And of course we wouldn't want that to happen. So we've employed a few ideas in places where your fingers are likely to touch metal. The game card slot and the Joy-Con 2 magnetic connectors are two such places. For example, we added parts to soften the impact of a sudden jolt of static electricity, and spots that absorb it. These spots stop the static electricity from getting parts that it might otherwise easily damage. Case with two types of material. The parts that encase the Nintendo Switch 2 console are made from two types of material. These materials are very tightly attached to each other. One is magnesium alloy, shown in orange, and the other is plastic, shown in black. The magnesium alloy is on the inside. It's strong and robust, and it also serves to reduce electromagnetic noise. Then there's the other outer layer of plastic. Even when the unit gets hot, the plastic lets you touch the console without feeling the heat. We stuck these two materials together to make full use of them. The console itself is thinner than if we had made it entirely out of plastic, and there's more space on the inside too. The console's upper USB-C connector. On top of the Nintendo Switch 2 console, you'll find a USB Type-C connector. It can be used to charge the console's battery. This allows the system to charge while you're playing in handheld or tabletop mode. But that's not all. The USB Type-C connector can also be used to connect the Nintendo Switch 2 camera to the console. The camera can be used while you're playing games in TV mode, tabletop mode, or handheld mode. However, USB Type-C connector cannot be used to connect to the Nintendo Switch 2 dock. This means it's not possible to insert the console into the dock upside down. You deserve a prize for all that reading. Oh, don't worry, I got a lot more to do. It's gonna be a long and chief. 1. What is the Nintendo Switch 2 console circuit board wrapped in to prevent electromagnetic noise from escaping? Rubber, plastic, metal, a blanket. I might already have this wrong. I think it's metal. 2. When you touch the metal part of a Nintendo Switch 2 console, what can be transmitted from your hand to the console? Good luck. Ultraviolet light, ultrasonic waves, static electricity. 3. The parts that encase the insides of the Nintendo Switch 2 console are made out of plastic and what other material? Titanium alloy, magnesium alloy, aluminum alloy, calcium alloy. 4. Which of the following can you not do with the USB Type-C connector on the top of the console? Charge the console, connect a camera, insert the console dock. It can do all of the above. Let's go. Another one done. Must be like a second home to you now. Oh, hi, you're here again. Oh, before I forget, I'd like to introduce my associate here. Let me explain. He's actually my personal assistant. He's always by my side, jotting down notes, though to be honest, I have no idea what he's taking notes on. He's a bit on the quiet side, but on the inside, he holds a blazing passion. We're conducting an inspection of the venue at the moment. Yeah, you're definitely the owner, if it wasn't painfully obvious. There's still so much. We've barely scratched the surface. Okay, I think we're going to start going to you next. You can learn about the console's wireless communication here. Find out about Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Nintendo's history with wireless communication, and more. Oh, so we're going to get on... Excuse me, oh my god. We're going to learn about probably the GBA wireless adapter and the DS and 3DS and Switch 1, probably. When it comes to wireless communication on Nintendo Switch 2, a few different methods are possible. There's online communication via Wi-Fi, Bluetooth communication between Switch 2 console and other devices such as Joy-Con 2 controllers, near-field communication NFC with Amiibo, and local communication between Nintendo Switch 2 consoles. Quite a list, huh? And since none of these communication methods involve cables, you don't have to worry about anything getting in the way or tangled up. Wireless communication can be pretty convenient. 3 antennas. Within the console, there are 3 antennas. These three antennas exchange signals with other devices. They're used to connect devices such as Joy-Con 2 controllers, Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controllers, or Bluetooth headphones. They can also be used to connect to the internet via Wi-Fi, or to other Nintendo Switch 2 consoles. What's more, the parts encasing the antennas as well as the console itself have an additional function. They actually help the antennas work. Preventing mixed-up signals. The Wi-Fi signal used for online communication and the Bluetooth signal used for devices such as Joy-Con 2 can get mixed up. If we don't employ extra measures to prevent this, it can result in poor communication between devices. So to help prevent this, we made sure that the signals take turns. The console can use either Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but not both at the same time. It can switch between these two types of communication very quickly. It also ever so slightly offsets the type of signal used. With these measures in place, the signals have a much lower risk of getting mixed up. The human body and antennas. Fun fact, it's difficult for radio signals to pass through the human body. So when the console is using Wi-Fi communication, if your hands or body is close to the antennas, it may weaken the signal. We took steps to make sure the signal wouldn't get weakened too much. One way we did was by considering the position of the antennas. It was chosen to ensure that your hands aren't blocking the antennas when playing in handheld mode. As for the Joy-Con 2 controller's antennas, there are different ways to hold the controllers depending on the game, so we tried to distribute them evenly as best we could. Then there are the antennas in the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller. There's only one way to hold the Pro controller, so we kept the antennas away from your expected hand position. Basically, the antennas were positioned based on how you would be holding the controllers. Alright, history lesson, let's go. Nintendo and wireless technology. In the past, Nintendo game consoles used cables for communication, but as time went on, there was a gradual shift to wireless technology. It used to be that when you wanted to connect two game consoles together to play, you would need a special cable to link them. The Game Boy Advance systems are examples of this. Later, a special adapter enabled wireless communication for Game Boy Advance. Nintendo DS followed with wireless communication capabilities as well. As for controllers, up until Nintendo GameCube, Nintendo controllers had to be connected with a cable. This is when the Wavebird controller came along, which uses dedicated radio signals. The Wii Remote after this uses Bluetooth. A similar shift can be seen with regard to internet connections. Nintendo GameCube had to connect to the internet via a LAN cable. After this, Nintendo DS and Wii went on to use Wi-Fi technology. Starting from the 2000s, the number of Nintendo devices utilizing wireless communication steadily increased. Rad. Quiz time. One. Which of the following can communicate wirelessly with the Switch 2 console? Hanafuda playing cards, Game & Watch consoles, Nintendo Sound Clock Alarmo amiibo. That's interesting they put Alarmo on here. You know, they put two old birds and then a modern bird. At least modern at the time of me recording this. Somewhat modern. It came out within the last year. There are three of these inside the Nintendo Switch 2 console. What are they? Styluses, antennas, umbrellas. Yeah, I'm just going to fit 3 whole umbrellas in our Switch 2. When the Nintendo Switch 2 console uses wireless communication, the following is offset. Shock waves, sound waves, radio waves, tidal waves. 4. Which of the following is the most difficult for signals to pass through? Excuse me. Oh my god. Air, glass, plastic, the human body. 5. Historically, through which medium have Nintendo game consoles communicated with each other and their controllers? Sonar, telephone landline, physical cables, the postal service. God, these joke answers are so funny. They didn't have to cook this hard on the fake answers. Alright. It's another one done. Okay, so I don't think there's any over this way. Yeah, this is all a dead end. So I think we're almost actually done with this ground floor here. So there's nothing over there. Then we're just looking over here. Alright, we're actually done with ground floor. Alright, moving on. Yeah, this place is kind of linear, so you can learn about microSD express memory cards here. Okay, this is actually going to be interesting. To find out how a microSD express card differs from a microSD card, the speed of a microSD express card, and more. Let's go. Got it. Feel free to explore microSD express memory card insights at your leisure. 5. Alright, let's do it. MicroSD express memory cards. MicroSD express card can be used to save various Nintendo Switch 2 data. Downloaded games as well as photos and videos taken with the capture button are saved to this card. It is a handy thing to have if you run out of a system memory. You can use a microSD card on a Nintendo Switch console, but only a microSD Express card will work on a Nintendo Switch 2 console. You'll find a place for it in the spot where you can pull out the stand. You just need to insert the card into the slot marked microSD Express, and you should be good to go. More pins. Let's take a closer look at a microSD Express card. While it may look similar to a microSD card, there are key differences. You notice one once you flip it over. What? I did not even notice that. It has a lot more pins. With these pins, data can be read and written in a new way. But since the original pins are still there, it can even work as a microSD card. It's actually compatible with Nintendo Switch consoles. A new way to read and write data. With the microSD Express card, the Nintendo Switch 2 console has a new way to read and write data. Compared to when you use a microSD card on a Nintendo Switch console, assuming a buffer size of 4 megabytes, the read speed would be about 8 times faster. However, different cards will typically read and write at different speeds. Some games will be doing more in the background than just loading, which means loading speeds may not always be around 8 times faster. Reading and writing speeds are getting faster. MicroSD Express cards only. The Nintendo Switch 2 console only accepts a specific type of card, and that is the microSD Express card. Take note that microSD cards won't work. The Nintendo Switch 2 console takes advantage of the speed at which microSD Express cards read and write data, and we'd like you to benefit from this extra speed as you enjoy new games. Although, that's not to say that microSD cards are completely unusable. If you still have photos and images saved to a microSD card that was used on a Nintendo Switch console, you can copy that data from the microSD card to the Nintendo Switch 2 console system memory. Less likely to get hot. The microSD Express card is fast. In fact, because it sends signals so quickly, it tends to get hot. Naturally, we tried as much as we can to avoid heat buildup. We thought about where to place the microSD Express card slot, and decided to put it near one of the air inlets to help keep it cool. On top of that, we kept the microSD Express card slot farther away from other parts of the console that are likely to get hot. We even applied graphite sheets to the microSD Express card slot. These sheets are very effective at transferring heat, and the sheets help spread the heat around, which keeps the area cool. Alright, quiz time. Let's go. Alright, here we go. Which of the following can be inserted here and used with Nintendo Switch 2 console? Greeting cards, game cards, download cards, microSD Express memory cards. 2. What does a microSD Express memory card have more of than a microSD card? Physical size, pins, ease of inserting into the console, they're the same. 3. How do the read and write speeds of a microSD Express memory card compare to that of a microSD card? They're equally fast. MicroSD cards are slightly faster. MicroSD Express cards are a lot faster. 4. What aspect of microSD Express memory cards do games with Nintendo Switch console make full use of? Their compact size, their lightweight, their pins luster, their reading and writing speeds. 5. The Nintendo Switch 2 console has been designed to benefit microSD Express memory cards in what way? It lets them read and write wirelessly, it slows down their read and write speeds, it stops them from cooling down, it stops them from heating up. Yeah, I was like, my brain was like trying to comprehend. I'm like, is it cooling down or heating up? But I was heating up for sure. Because we aced it. Not a single wrong answer. Tip of the hat for that. Looks like you have a lot of insight into microSD Express memory cards. Alright, moving on. We still got a lot more to go, but we're making good progress. Alright, we'll do you next. We'll learn about 3D sound here. You'll learn how it sounds when heard through a pair of headphones, from the console speakers, and more. Alright, console speaker insights 2. 3D sound. When you play games that support surround sound on Nintendo Switch 2, you can enjoy 3D sound, whether it's coming from the Nintendo Switch 2 console speakers or from a pair of headphones. This works not just for Nintendo Switch 2 games, but for Nintendo Switch games as well. Whoa, that's interesting. You might even hear sound coming from places where there aren't any speakers. 3D sound with headphones. When you're listening to 3D sound with headphones connected to the Nintendo Switch 2 console, game sounds are processed to make it seem like they're coming from different directions. For example, if a sound is meant to be coming from the right side in game, you'll hear that sound in your right ear slightly sooner. The left-right balance is calculated to reach your ears at the right time. This means that there's a slight delay before the sound comes out of the left and right sides of the headphones. And that's not all. We used a dummy head microphone to simulate how the sound changes based on several factors, including how it bounces around the external ear in complex ways, how it reverberates through the head, and so on. As a result, it will give the impression that the sound is coming from somewhere else. 3D sound of the console speakers. As for 3D sound coming from the Nintendo Switch 2 console speakers, it doesn't work the same way as it does with headphones. On a pair of headphones, sounds from the left and right ear can be played to each respective ear. In the case of speakers, though, you would still hear sounds from the right speaker in your left ear and vice versa. The sounds would mix and jumble, making it difficult to hear. So the console speakers employ a certain trick. They cancel out the sound that reaches your opposite ear. So when sound that would reach your left ear plays from the right speaker, complex signals play along with it to cancel out that sound. As a result, sounds from the left will only reach the left ear, and sounds from the right will only reach the right. That's weird. That's kind of weird, but also cool. Also very cool. Alright, 1. To enjoy games with 3D sound in Switch 2, which feature must be compatible with? Monaural sound? I've never heard that. Stereo sound, surround sound, and round sound. Surround. 2. When using headphones to listen to 3D sound on the Nintendo Switch 2 console, what happens to the sound on either side coming from different directions? They're cancelled out, they're swapped, their timings are aligned, their timings are offset. Right? Yeah. Okay. 3. When you're listening to 3D sound from the speakers of the Nintendo Switch 2 console, signals are emitted to cancel what? Dinner plans, pre-orders for downloadable software, sounds around the console, sounds that enter the opposite ear. Alright, another one in the books. You aced it, that was inspiring. I bet you could speak about speakers for days now. Alright. 46% now. And I should get 100% because I have... Oh no, I have everything but the tech demo. Because I have to do that in handheld mode. So that's something. And now we're moving up in the world. We're moving up in the world. We'll do you first. You have to hear about the screen's range of colors, or perhaps the refresh rate. Alright. Console screen insights 2. 3 more. Vivid screen. The Nintendo Switch 2 screen can produce very vivid colors. A deep and vibrant red, for instance, in order to produce such rich colors. A very thick color filter is used. However, when you use a thick filter, the resulting image will be darker. If you compensate for this with more brightness, the battery will drain more quickly. We didn't want to compromise on battery life, so instead, to keep the image from getting too dark, we make the shining dots pixels as large as they could be. We also made other customizations along these lines. Liquid crystal display. The Nintendo Switch 2 screen uses a liquid crystal display. It works in much the same way as the Nintendo Switch console screen. It's much brighter and more vivid than the Nintendo Switch console screen, though. Also, the Nintendo Switch OLED model screen uses an OLED system. OLED screens are very vivid, but the Nintendo Switch 2 console's LCD screen is also quite striking. While it's true that the OLED model's colors are a little richer, the Nintendo Switch 2 console screens can be brighter. The screen is also HDR compatible. For those who have both consoles, it might be interesting to compare them. I'm kind of surprised that they brought OLED into this conversation at all. Like, it'd be much easier to just compare it to Switch 1 and be like, hey guys, look how much better it is. But again, they don't have to sell you on something because you already bought the console. The number of times per second that a screen changes its image is called the refresh rate. For example, if the image were to change 60 times per second, you'd say that its refresh rate is 60 Hz. In the case of the Nintendo Switch 2 console screen, it supports a refresh rate of 120 Hz. It also supports VRR, which allows for switching between refresh rates, but each of these features have also been fine-tuned. If the image changes 120 times per second, the pictures do change incredibly quickly. But it also means anything that interferes with the signal, such as resistance, will have a more noticeable effect. This can ruin the image as a result. So we had to implement a few ways to reduce the amount of interference. Conversely, when there are fewer pictures changing per second, the colors gradually fade and the image gets darker. So we also had to find ways to ensure that the colors don't fade easily. Alright. Another quiz. 1. Which of the following is used to produce a bright red color in the Nintendo Switch 2 screen? An apple peel, a thick red filter, a thin red filter, a red pencil. A red pencil. 2. The Nintendo Switch 2 screen outputs its image via which medium? Shadow puppetry, plasma, liquid crystal, cathode ray tube. 3. What's the term for the number of times the screen changes image per second in a second? Image progression, stop animation, refresh rate, quantum pulse. A perfect score. Let's go. That's another one done. Oh, hey, you're here again. And there's a sequel. So, you've read a truly staggering number of insights. Perhaps I'll share some more tidbits about the tech demos. Do you know that if you press and hold B during the HDR fireworks demo, you can launch a different kind of firework? In the super resolution demo, you can use R to toggle between images instantly. And lastly, in the HD Rumble 2 motorcycle demo, you can press L and R or R to honk the horn. Trying to I wasn't aware of these either. The staff just told me. Press and hold B. I'm gonna go test that out actually. I'm interested to see what it is. Oh wait, that was a handheld one. Oh man, I'll have to remember that for the handheld video. Alright, moving on. More about the screen. You'll find about the increased screen size, the process through which it lights up, and more. Alright, 3 more. A bigger screen. In terms of screen size, the Nintendo Switch 2 console screen is about 7.9 inches. Compare this with the Nintendo Switch console's 6.2-inch screen, and the 7-inch screen of the OLED model. It's gotten pretty big. In fact, it's the biggest screen of all Nintendo consoles to date. You know what, that tracks. This makes it look even more impressive in tabletop and handheld modes. I'm just surprised it's bigger than Wii U. I'm comparing the two right now because they're like kind of next to me on my setup. Yeah, Switch 2 is bigger. That's crazy. It's also easier to see when playing with others. By the way, it's actually slightly bigger than 7.9 inches. Sometimes bigger is better. The Nintendo Switch 2 console does have a large screen, which actually has some benefits you might not be aware of. For instance, a bigger screen means the computer can even do even more calculations. How? Well, the more calculations the computer performs, the hotter it gets. The larger the device, the less likely it is to heat up. This allows the computer to perform lots of calculations. So lay it all out. The bigger the screen, the bigger the console. The larger the console, the less likely it is to heat up. The cooler it stays, the more calculations the computer can do, and the more calculations it can do, the more pictures and characters it can ultimately calculate. So, if the computer can calculate lots of pictures and characters, then the images should look clear and smooth, and many characters can be moving around at once. That's the goal anyway. A little light goes a long way. The Nintendo Switch 2 console screen lights up fully to display images. This light is produced by white LEDs. A single LED emits a tiny point of light. As they are, these little lights aren't enough to light up the whole screen, but with the use of a translucent plate called a light guiding plate, the light of an LED can be spread. There's a slight unevenness to the plate. This will reflect. I'm starting to lose it. I have been talking for about a half hour because there's a lot of shit in here. Anyway, this reflects the light in a complex, uneven way and spreads out. In this way, by lining up a bunch of LEDs next to the plate, the entire screen can light up. To ensure uniform brightness of the screen, we experimented with different bumpy patterns, eventually setting on the current design. Volume 3. Here we go. 1. In terms of size, roughly how many inches is Nintendo Switch 2 screen? 3.14, 6.2, 7.0, 7.9. 2. What can the Nintendo Switch 2 console do now that's bigger? Write essays, make many calculations, perform science experiments, feel human emotions. I don't want AI in here. 3. The light that lights up the entire Nintendo Switch 2 screen starts out as what kind of light? Sunlight, thin rays of light, small dots of light, light from fireflies. This one. Because it's not a dot, because it's a ray beam. What? Huh? What did I miss? Was it the wrong one? What do you mean, dude? Is it really the spec? You're kidding me. A tiny point? You're stupid. I hate this game. This game is bad. Let's try that again. 7.9. Make any calculations. Small dots. There we go. We're good. Let's go. Another one in the bag. You're awfully knowledgeable about the Nintendo Switch 2 console screen. I'm proud of you. Thanks, homie. There's another one? What do you mean? How many are there? Dude, there's so many. Oh man, we still got a long way to go. How far are we? We're up to 54% now. And my voice is starting to die on me. Excuse me. Jeez Louise. I might do these next two quizzes in the end session or end the video because my voice is starting to kill me. Do you have any ideas how thin the Switch 2 screen is? Or how it's made up of so many different parts? Just say you want to know more. A slightly lower screen. One thing about the Switch 2 console screen is that it's actually a slightly different depth from the area around it. How slight, you ask? Well, the screen is deeper by about the thickness of a piece of printer paper. It's barely noticeable, but this height difference helps prevent the screen from coming into contact with the floor or other surfaces. A thinner screen. One thing about the Switch 2 console screen is it's made up of many overlapping parts. There's the LCD, a shatter-resistant film, a screen-cover transparent plastic, two polarizing plates, two pieces of glass, a touch sensor, a light guiding plate, an LED film, and so on. With all these parts layered on top of each other, there was a risk of the screen becoming too thick. There wouldn't have been space left for the other parts. So we made the cover out of thin, tempered glass. For other parts, we chose the thinnest possible ones we could find. Basically, we designed the screen to be as thin as possible. A long, thin IC. Often, on the inside of a computer, there's a component called an IC, integrated circuit. It's typically square-shaped. As for the IC that controls the Nintendo Switch 2 console screen and touch input, it's pretty thin, measuring about 30mm by 1mm. It has to control more than 2 million dots called pixels, 1,920 horizontally and 1,080 vertically, as well as over 900 touch sensors. It uses over 3,000 wires to achieve this. In order to be able to attach all the terminals connecting so many wires, the IC had to be long and thin. Alright, let's go. Console screen volume 4. I think that's the most volumes we've ever had. What would you need to place on top of the Nintendo Switch 2 screen to have it match the height of the area around it? A notepad, a postcard, a sheet of printer paper. 2. The components shown are layered on top of each other to make what part of the Nintendo Switch 2 console? The mousepad, the battery, the circuit board, the screen. Guys, what's this quiz about? I don't know. It's just the battery pad? What kind of shape is the IC integrated circuit that controls the Nintendo Switch 2 screen and its touch input? Circular, triangular, long and thin, heart-shaped. Yeah, we're good. Let's go. Major congratulations. Your perfect score demands a standing ovation. You're a veritable beast when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 console screen. Please don't make it volume 5. Yay, we're actually done. That was a journey. Alright, so then we got you. Dude, it took up that's crazy. It took up so much room. Alright. Learn about the Switch 2 console's battery capacity. Find out about battery capacity, past batteries from Nintendo, and more. There's battery insights for you. 3 more. 1.2x battery capacity. In terms of performance, the Nintendo Switch 2 console is several times better than the Nintendo Switch console. Naturally, this means it requires more power. We've done our best to reduce the amount of power it uses, of course, but even after optimizing the console, we needed to get it more power. If we'd used the same battery that's used in Nintendo Switch, you wouldn't be able to use the Switch 2 for very long. So for Nintendo Switch 2, we opted for a different battery. This new 5220 mAh battery has 1.2x the capacity of the old one. mAh stands for milliampere hours? I have no idea what that means. An increase of 1.2x doesn't mean you'll be able to use the console for 1.2 times longer, but we did our best to maximize the time that you can play on it. Battery longevity. We believe that video game consoles should be long-term companions. We'd like you to be able to keep on using them for many years to come. That's why we did our best to make sure the Nintendo Switch 2 console's battery lasts a long time. There are a few things we did to achieve this. We've purposefully tried to ensure that the battery doesn't get too much power when it's charged. If it did, the energy output would be slightly weakened, and the battery could begin to degrade. Also, it's easy to damage a battery with fast charging, so we've done our best to prevent this. Our focus was on how many times the console can be charged. We wanted to be able to be charged even more times than a smart device. Nintendo and batteries. Nintendo has a history of using batteries to power game consoles, lithium-ion batteries in particular. Console battery life has been improving with successive generations. The Game Boy Advance SP has 600, DS 850, 3DS 1300, Switch 4310, and Switch 2 has 5220. Incidentally, the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance system uses dry cell batteries. In those days, if you ran out of battery while playing, you had to throw away the dry cell batteries and buy new ones. Whoa. What is going on there? It's not doing it right now, because it's not on the right part of the screen. Yeah, you can see it there. I know that's coming through on video, but my TV has dead pixels. And they seem to be, yeah, the home menu. The old home menu, actually. That's the old home menu. The hell? Yeah, it's the that's crazy. It goes album, controller, settings. So virtual game cards and game show. That's the old menu burnt on there. That's crazy. I don't remember that being a thing. I must have roughed my Switch one on at some point. That's embarrassing. Now I feel like a massive idiot. 1. How much more capacity does the Nintendo Switch 2 console's battery have than the Nintendo Switch console's battery? 0.x, there's no difference. 1.2x, 100x. I wish it was the last option. What does everybody else do? 2. Why is the Nintendo Switch 2 console's battery not supplied with too much power? It makes the battery lighter, it makes the battery smaller, it increases the battery capacity, it helps prevent battery degradation. 3. What was used to power the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance systems? The desire to play. Clockwork. Solar batteries. Ugh. Dry cell batteries. If it was solar, that would suck. Actually, with a Game Boy Advance SP, you can charge it with a regular cable. Well, look at that. You got them all right. I hope that quiz recharged your own batteries. Alrighty. We're at 61%. I think we've gone through about half of the insights. Actually, I think I'll do one more. But I'll save the others for next time. So we'll do one more quiz. And then I'll end session because my throat needs a break. You can learn about the Nintendo Switch 2 console's heat dissipation methods here. You'll find out about the Switch 2 console's fan, airflow, and more. Nice, I'm so glad. Here it is then. Heat dissipation insights 1. Electronic devices get hot. Some electronic devices can heat up the longer they run. They can get particularly hot when performing fast calculations, communicating rapidly, or running while being charged. And using devices that are hot to the touch definitely isn't fun. But that's not the only problem. If the parts are too hot, the device itself may fail to work properly. Some parts could even break completely. To ensure this doesn't happen, Nintendo Switch 2 cools down parts in different ways so they don't get too hot. A quiet fan. The Nintendo Switch 2 console does its best to keep itself from heating up. One way it does this is with a built-in fan. The fan tunnels air into the console and blows it at different parts. The hot air is then pushed out to keep things cool. The fan isn't always running though. First, it uses the temperature sensor to check how hot the console is. If it's hot, the fan runs at high speed, but if it's not too hot, it'll only spin a little. At low speeds, the fan will be so quiet you can barely hear it. Try putting your ear up to the fan and listening for yourself. Air flows to the front and back. The Nintendo Switch 2 console contains a circuit board. The components on the circuit board generate heat. These need to be cooled down. To do this, air flows to both the front and back of the circuit board. Both sides are directly connected via the air inlet, and the fan draws in air, ventilating both the front and back. And so, the components on both the front and back of the circuit board can be safely cooled. Easy airflow. To cool the Nintendo Switch 2 console with air, the airflow needs to be as smooth as possible. With good airflow, the fan doesn't have to push itself to high speeds. Air inlets were made on the underside to let air straight in. At the outlet, the air comes straight out, unobstructed. Thanks to this and the console's more powerful fan, Nintendo Switch 2 provides roughly twice the airflow of Nintendo Switch. If you're here, you can do only one thing, it's quiz time! 1. What happens to electronic devices as they run? They get cold, they get hot, they get cold, they get hot, they get lighter, they get sleepy. Sleepy, you gotta go to sleep. Which of the following is attached to the Nintendo Switch 2 console to cool it down? Ice, a refrigerator, a fan, an air conditioner. 3. Where does the air flow over on the circuit? I just totally messed up that line. Where is the airflow over on the Nintendo Switch 2 console circuit board to cool it down? The front, the back, both the front and back. 4. How much airflow does the Nintendo Switch 2 console provide in contrast to the Nintendo Switch console? About the same amount, a little more, twice as much. Yo. Let's go. We did it. A perfect score. Too cool. You obviously don't have any built-in heat dissipation because you're on fire. Thanks, homie. And you're here too. Or you're too excited to forget, there are more heat dissipation insights to take in. Really? You're almost done with all the quizzes. That's incredible. You're incredible. You've nearly finished with the exhibition's quizzes. So for you to have read so many, you have no idea how happy it makes me. Alright, so I think that we're going to end session here today. For now, at least for now, at 66%. So probably, I said this at the end of the last video, but for sure next time, we'll definitely be able to finish, at least all of the insights. So that'll be pretty exciting. So I will see you guys next time. Take care. Pickles.